Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for joining our final community learning session. My name is Lori Martinez. I'm the Director of Engage New Mexico. And on behalf of our Success Partnership Backbone team, I'd like to welcome you to our 7th community learning session on experiential learning today. A couple housekeeping things right up front. If you would, just go ahead and type your name and organization and also your role, if you would like, into the chat, and we can just do some introductions that way and get a sense of everybody who is in the room. During these learning sessions, we have been cramming a lot into an hour, so that's been fun. But these learning sessions have been really an opportunity for us to learn from people who are doing amazing work in education in our community. And so within the Success Partnership, our mission is to improve education outcomes, really to see education outcomes transformed in Doña Ana County across the prenatal to career spectrum. And so part of the way we do that, a big part of the way we do that, our work is through community partnerships of all shapes and sizes. And so as you all know, we have an early childhood coalition that is alive and well and very active. In November, we launched a countywide K through career coalition. And one of the first steps in that has been to really look at some of the community education experts we have in our community, what kind of work is already going on. And as we really get the work at the K through career coalition underway, looking at where we can leverage our collective resources around initiatives that are already going or things that are emerging. And then I'm certain that during the course of our continued convenings and launching the action networks within the K through Career Coalition, that there will be more initiatives that come to light, more ways that our community can come together to partner and really to be able to experiment with what are the ways that we can work together really effectively in the interest of transforming education outcomes. So, all right, I'm seeing all the chat introductions come in. Thank you for that. If you're just joining us, please do just a quick intro in the chat, name, organization, if applicable, and your role. Okay, so next, in terms of the agenda and what to expect, I'll introduce our speaker here in a moment. They'll present for roughly half an hour, and then we'll have some time afterwards for Q&A, but also just any discussion. Right now, you are muted. If you have questions, we have typically been asking people to save them for the end, but if there are any points of clarification you need along the way, of course, put those in the chat, and we'll have our team looking out for questions, and we'll flag our speaker down for answers. Afterwards, like I said, we'll do Q&A and some any discussion. We want to ask you all to just be mindful of, we want to be able to have a chance to hear from everybody who wants to speak. So if you could keep your questions to roughly, or comments to roughly 1 to 2 minutes, and then that way we can make sure everyone has a chance to participate who wants to. All right, how are we doing so far? All good? Okay, well then with that, it is my pleasure to introduce to you our speaker today, Dr. Timothy Hand, who is the Las Cruces Public Schools Chief of Staff. I know some of you all already know who he is, but Tim is a proud product of Las Cruces Public Schools as a graduate of Loma Heights, Zia Middle School, and Las Cruces High School. He served in administrative roles in Las Cruces at LCPS and NMSU, and also around the state, including recently a stint with the legislature and serving as the Deputy Secretary of Education. But his most cherished role is that of a high school coach, where he spent 15 years teaching and learning from high school students. This experience sets his priorities as a strength-based, growth-oriented champion for the education of the whole child. And we are very happy to have him here today to talk to us about experiential learning. So welcome, Tim.
Thank you, Lori, and what a group we have here today. Thanks for everyone taking a little bit of time to talk through what I feel is a very valuable topic that's raising itself throughout the state currently around experiential learning. And I'd like to kind of set the stage before I go to you always got to have a slide deck, right, for one of these things. So I did one of those, but I wanted to kind of set the stage to let everyone know that experiential learning, it's not a new thing. It was actually Kolb came up with what really solidified the theory back in the 70s. And there's places throughout, there's classrooms, there's schools, there's districts all throughout the country that are embedding experiential learning into the educational experience of students. Right here in Las Cruces, we have the Enlace program, who I go every year to at the end of the Enlace program, to where they show the work that they've done on community-based problems and how they've experientially woven that into their academic experience. I think of the kids at Oregon Mountain High School are building a house, right? I mean, I said, I didn't stutter there. They're building a house at Oregon Mountain High School, experiential learning. I was out in Robbie Berry's classroom in the fall, where her 5th graders they designed outdoor learning spaces for the district, right? They got together, and those kids, using math skills and collaboration skills, they designed outdoor learning spaces to combat some of the repercussions from COVID. And it's just, so this is not a new idea. It's just an idea that I think we need to do more of. And with that, I will do the customary share of the screen and then ask if everyone can see it with some sort of thumbs up or nod. There's a thumbs up from Lori, and we'll start from the beginning. So I've called this talk today, Experiential Learning in the Public School Experience. Really, the 3 big buckets that we'll cover are experiential learning, graduate profiles, and capstone assessments. And like I said, to frame things up, this is not a new idea, but certainly something that we need more of, and here is why. When we think about the status quo and the school system as it stands, lots of good things happening. However, there's a new report out that focused on disconnected youth. And disconnected youth has a very specific definition, and that's human beings that are 16 to 24 who are neither in school nor working, right? So New Mexico, unfortunately, came up at the top of the list of disconnected youth, and of metro areas, Albuquerque was the highest at about 20% of human beings who are 16 to 24 that are disconnected. And so that engagement, academics is important, but in the absence of engagement, academics, it doesn't matter how great of an academic program you have if the kids aren't interested, if they don't see connections to their real world, if they don't see connections to their community, if they don't see connections to their career path, they become disconnected. There's also lots of trauma in this world of ours and adverse childhood experiences that lead to disconnected youth. And so the system that we build and design has to take all of that into account. And then I also wouldn't be able to talk through the need for experiential learning without talking through Martinez-Yazzie, which was a decision that found New Mexico is failing in its constitutional obligation to provide an adequate and sufficient education for school-age children. And then even more specifically, that decision has supported that outcomes for low-income students, English learners, American Indian, and students with disability are negatively impacted by the system as it stands. So we got to do something. And experiential learning it's a part of kind of the pathways and profiles part of, I'd say, the work that the state's doing. And it's the thing that I want to also really emphasize is that it's not a silver bullet. It's not a standalone approach to fixing the world. The plaintiffs in Martinez-Yazzie came up with a remedy platform in 2018. And I'll let you I'm not going to read this to you, but I'll let you kind of read through what some of the big findings were on what the legislature should do, on what the public education department should do, and what schools should do. But I'll highlight a few things here that develop appropriate curricular standards and monitor student performance. We'll be touching on that through this presentation. You want to make sure that you monitor and ensure schools' budgets are funding toward evidence-based programs and that support at-risk students. We want to make sure that we monitor student outcomes and provide appropriate interventions to close achievement gaps and the like. So I think you've had enough time to kind of read through there. We'll head to the next slide. And in response to the plaintiff's findings in Martinez-Yazzie, the state of New Mexico has developed 4 buckets of work in order to be able to, I'd say, respond to Martinez-Yazzie and respond to transforming the educational system so that it works for New Mexico citizens. And these 4 buckets are here in front of you. I led some work with the Public Education Department a couple summers ago where we brought together dozens and dozens of people from around the state to talk through what sort of asset-based resources we have as a state, some things that we're missing, and where we really want to head as an educational system. Again, I'm speaking and giving you some time to read through, and I will highlight the pathways and profiles bucket of work for the state of New Mexico, because that's where experiential learning rests. So pathways and profiles, it's meant to increase students' successful completion of high school with research-based, relevant, applied, and experiential learning opportunities that support all students to become college and career ready and contribute as productive members of their community. So that's the framing for where experiential learning fits into the grand scheme of things. Again, not a silver bullet, but one lever in an approach to supporting students and educators across the state. And so that brings us to our first question here, experiential learning. So my question to the group and my question to anyone that will listen or anyone that gets cornered in a Zoom room with me like this is, how do human beings learn new things? And is the best thing that we could do, do we grab 30 kids and put them in a room somewhere and stick a person at the front of the room and have them write stuff on a board and ask questions? Is that the best way to teach human beings? So I would ask in the chat, if you wouldn't mind, just put in a few words about in your experience, or in your, I'd say in your experience as an experiential learning talk here, in your experience, how do human beings learn new things? So just take a minute to run through the chat and answer that prompt, please. I see some of those that you have cameras on. I see some fingers moving. That seems encouraging. Cheryl, I see you. Hands-on experiences. Thank you, Pam. By trying new things. Vanessa, thank you. We learn by doing and then reflecting on what we did. Somebody gets a gold star there. I think it is from both books and experiences. Great when the experiential hands-on learning fortifies book learning. I've got exploring and experimenting from Erica. Thank you. Lori says sight, touch, sound, active learning, hands-on, interactive, not sitting in a chair all day. Mike, interactive, fun, challenged, recognition, peer collaboration. And here comes Cheryl. As a 31-year educator, I really saw the difference it made in student engagement and learning when our school focused on PBL, which is project-based learning, play from Kimmy, and by teaching each other, Daniel. And I see, Daniel, you changed your last name there to Torrea from Torres. Congratulations on that improvement. Good to see you, Daniel. And just wanted to kind of kick things off there. Well done. I think it's one of those times where it sounds like I may be preaching to the choir a bit here, but that's never a bad thing. And really the issue is, how much did that reflect your school experience, right? Like everything that we just talked about, how reflective is that of your school experience? And the best way that I've been able to kind of sum this up, and I have to admit, and I have to disclose my bias here, as you heard in my biography, I was a high school coach for 15 years. So I've seen kids hundreds and hundreds of thousands of times try and then fail and then adjust, right? I've seen it. I can't even tell you how many hours I've spent doing that here on the earth. And really the way that I describe this is that learning is the residue of experience, right? that learning is the residue of experience. And we get away from that a bit. There was a time before the World Wide Web where information recall was important, where knowing things that can now be Googled, and we do it often, right? There was that whole knowledge transfer, and there was those who had the knowledge and those who transferred the knowledge. The world has changed, and education is trying to change along with it, and experiential learning really is the path in my opinion. So having said that, we'll go back here to the next slide, and we've got a quick little video to share.
Tim, I'm not sure the sound is coming through. Am I the only one having trouble?
The theory is
Do I-
built on 6
if I
propositions
unmute, is
that are
that better?
shared by the foundational.
Oh, there we
you
go.
Yeah, you have to share your audio. Perfect.
There you go.
I'm gonna
Learning
back it
outcome
up.
was on the work of prominent.
Do over. Trial and
Theoretical
error.
learning theory draws on the work of prominent 20th century thinkers who made experience a central role in their theories of human learning and development. David Kolb synthesized the work of these foundational scholars to develop a holistic model of experiential learning theory. Learning is the process whereby knowledge is created through the transformation of experience. This is ELT in a nutshell. The theory is built on 6 propositions that are shared by the foundational scholars. Learning outcome is not an endpoint, but simply a resting point of an ongoing learning process. As we learn new ideas, we also modify and dispose of old ones. Effective learners are capable of balancing the opposing modes in the learning cycle. Learning never ends. It encompasses all life stages, from childhood to adolescence to middle and old age. When learners and the environment interact, both are changed. We do not simply respond to the environment, but we recreate it to meet our needs. Every field requires unique skills and a special learning process. Learning to develop skills in empathic listening is different than learning skills in engineering. Since its emergence in the early 1970s, there have been over 90,000 experiential learning citations, and ELT has been used to create countless educational courses in multiple fields. Since 2000, ELT research in many fields around the world has more than quadrupled. Experiential learning theory is highly interdisciplinary, addressing learning and educational issues in at least 30 academic disciplines. More and more institutions and educators are experimenting with experiential learning practices beyond higher education. In recent years, K-12 institutions, business organizations, and non-formal organizations have embraced ELT to respond to the learning needs of their clients and constituents. Through recursive cycles of experience, discussion, feedback, and practice and application in real-life context, learners report increased levels of critical thinking abilities and the capacity to apply and connect theoretical knowledge with real-life application. Like Kurt Lewin said, there is nothing so practical as a good theory. And like David Hunt said, there is nothing so theoretical as a good practice. ELT continues to be renewed and enriched through the collective experience of those who apply the theory in their practices around the world. As the workplace, marketplace, and global environment continue to evolve, experiential learning theory is designed to respond to the educational needs of the 21st century.
So there's that. And we'll proceed now to the next slide. And I usually only put this slide. I also want to note that I'm trying to be kind, so you don't have to listen to me the whole time. You get a little nice soft music in the background and someone else telling you about the things that I believe in. I typically put this slide in, but there's got to be a lot of context whenever you start talking about, and Erica can tell us about this, and I probably has in another community session, but our standardized testing platform and framework is meant to be a thermometer and a dipstick into the system, right? It's basically what it does is it's designed as an accountability for the system, for the educational system. Oftentimes we look at it and say that certain students can't read or certain students can't write, or that if we look up here at the top on our 8th graders in New Mexico scoring below proficient in math by race, ethnicity, gender, and income 2019, we see that 92% of Native American students are scoring below proficient. The way I read that chart is that our system serves 8% of Native American students, right? I think that's the way to look at this data. It's not necessary. I don't typically think that we should use it for anything other than a measurement of how the system's doing. And the system, as we saw earlier with our disengagement, we're about a fifth of kids are disengaged. And here where we're looking at math and reading scores, they're just not, the system isn't serving students well. Now, having said that, math and reading, if once we get, I'm going to get into this next piece here. So experiential career connected learning really is a partnership with the community. There's the kick the dog syndrome, right? That when students make it to the workforce, the workforce always says, well, I wish kids these days, that's the whole kids these days, right? I wish kids these days would show up to work on time, or I wish kids these days knew how to communicate in groups or be in teams. And really, for educators, what this means, it's really elevating these community and career-oriented outcomes so that they become a central component of the student experience. And that takes a lot of work. It requires aligning educational programs and curriculum and institution and credentials and budgets with the focus on what the community values, with what skills are needed to have a flourishing career as a young adult. But also for the community, it means proactively investing in the workforce needed rather than waiting and hoping that the educational system will deliver the right candidates. It's partnering with educators to create meaningful pathways, and that requires resources and commitment. And the payback, of course, is a more diverse pool of citizens. So, for instance, the education house here in Las Cruces, where our Oñate students, my goodness, our Organ Mountain High School students, I grew up here, guys, it's taken me a little while. Our Organ Mountain High School students are partnering with the Las Cruces Home Builders Association to build a house. And that will both engage those students in school, right? It will offer academic opportunities in mathematics and teamwork, and also lots of technical skills, but also builds the pool of candidates that the housing market around here has to be able to bring in to help them with their endeavors. So I really also see experiential career connected learning as a partnership. So this just quickly tells you that experiential learning is more than just CTE. So CTE is your traditional career and technical education. Here in Connecticut, where kids went to a CTE high school, right? And that's where you go and your content is really rich and embedded in technical skills that not only did these students, once they graduated, they had a substantial impact on their academic performance and on their pay, it also generally engaged students in their more academic pursuits. So there at the bottom, you can see that the increased academic engagement that's created because of those interests means that they're not just going to do better at becoming a plumber or an HVAC specialist, but also going to accumulate the general skills that people need to succeed in the labor market in the long run. So I really want us to try to avoid, when we talk about experiential learning, to think about career and technical or non-college bound or something for those kids that aren't going to college. It's much more and much broader than that, that despite your career or college aspirations, getting your hands on your learning is the way that people interact with learning and interact with building knowledge. And so, for instance, if let's say that you're going to college to be an electrical engineer, might it be of value to wire a house, right? Or to actually get your hands on electricity and on electrical circuits and learn about electricity beyond just reading about it. So it's not, I want to stay away from it as thinking about this as CTE. This is much bigger and much broader than that. So something Las Cruces Public Schools is going to do as we start trying to make an investment in experiential learning is we have, for this next school year, we've picked a day for every month where we're going to have enriched learning days with deep experiences for students. So just for instance, let's just pick out October here. That'll be a Build My Future event to where we'll get all the skilled and technical workforce from around the community. They'll all be there in front of Rawson's Building Supply and have an opportunity for students to go and interact with them and other CTA related activities. And again, for not just for CTE students, not just for those on a vocational trajectory, just getting everyone opportunity to experience career and technical education. November, PBL, Cheryl, I think it was you who mentioned PBL earlier. We'll have some problem-based learning on that day surrounding the history and culture of Las Cruces. We'll get our hands on. I can imagine a high school group going and filming Mesquite Street and talking about the history there, right? December, computer science, hour of code. We'll get some keyboards in the hands of kids and have them actually code. The supercomputing challenge, that to me, that's school, right? Typically we think of the supercomputing challenge as something a few kids do as extracurricular, right? Or something that you have to go and fundraise for and then go on a Saturday up to New Mexico Tech. I've actually gone up with kids to do that before, but really that is school. Again, we'll pick out a couple more here. In March, we'll focus on Earth. In April, we'll look at space in conjunction with the Las Cruces Space Festival. And then in May, what I'm really excited about is really focusing on celebrating success. And this will be where students share their accomplishments from the year in various modes. So that leads us very nicely into the next question here. So experiential learning, I hope now you have a pretty good feel for what that is, for what it's not, and for kind of the opportunity in front of us for education on how we can leverage experiential learning to engage students, to get into much deeper, richer learning, to make connections between what a student is learning and their career or college aspirations. And now kind of the next piece here is graduate profiles. So the next big question that I try to ask people and think through a lot is, what should students learn from their public education experience? And we'll, again, engage those keyboards in the chat function to be able to jump in on, I'm asking the question, what should students learn from their public education experience? So I'll pop up the chat here and share where people land on this. Promise it will only be awkward for a couple more seconds while we get a few more of these chats coming in. Thank you, Stephanie, for breaking it here. How to work with others and use their knowledge and skills to make a difference in the world. Beautifully said. Got Michelle with useful skills and knowledge that help them successfully navigate adulthood. Well said again. Pam Court with students need to be the stakeholders in their assessment process. Thank you for that. Liz is talking about competency and confidence. Mike with there's curriculum-based instruction that plants ideas and goals. There's experiential learning that allows students to know what they have learned. Well said. Lori, critical thinking, problem solving, skills necessary to function as citizens in our society. Certainly agree with that. Erica starts with healthy. I like that's a good start to a sentence there. Healthy social skills, solid academic foundation for post-secondary success and career. We'll let one or two more trickle in here and then we'll proceed. And I'm going to admit Cheryl from the waiting room. I don't know if you've got a twin, Cheryl, or not, or if you got kicked out. And okay, thank you for sharing those. And my answer to this question, all of those answers were very thoughtful. And my answer typically to this question is it depends. And it depends on the community. And I think we get away from that we try. I think everything that you guys wrote were very good, broad, general goals. And one thing that we've really learned here in New Mexico and through Martinez Yazzie is that it depends on the community. And so I will proceed to the next slide here. And there's been some work around the state around this concept of graduate profiles. And what graduate profiles are very similar to the core function of community schools, which I try to tell people as often as possible. The core function of a community school is to ask the community what they need, right? Like there's all this other stuff. There's coordinators and there's shared leadership, all very important, but the core function is to engage the community and ask them what they need in that community. And that's the same goal of graduate profile work. So the one on the left, the balloon there, that was the Central New Mexico graduate profile work, where they went around to the community through surveys and focus groups and actually put a lot of effort in. The United Way was a big partner in that work, but these were some of the things that they came up with: integrity, self-awareness, work ethic, history and cultural awareness, empathy. And you can see that a lot of these things build on each other, that at the core of the graduate profile is curiosity and willingness to learn. Because I got to tell you, without that core function there at the bottom, the rest of it is really, really tough to get to. Because I was blown away that disengagement survey actually just came out a few days ago. And with 20% of 16 to 24-year-olds disengaged, we should spend some time at the bottom there, right? Curiosity and willingness to learn. But this is what the community would expect a diploma to look like in Central New Mexico. And then you're probably going to have to minimize the video over here of the participants. But when you do that, you can see Zuni Public Schools on the right. And this one got to me, guys. When I saw this, they just wrapped this graduate profile up here just recently. And just seeing some of the contrast between Central New Mexico and then Zuni up in our northwestern part of the state, the big things that came out was knowledgeable, healthy, creative, adaptable, to be a contributor and be connected. I'll point out just a few more things here that students within the Zuni community create original works that express thoughtfulness and innovation. Students in the Zuni community should live intentionally. They should exemplify proficiency in Zuni language, culture, and history. Students should demonstrate proficiency in, here's the traditional one, right? That they should demonstrate proficiency in content knowledge, academic skills, and technology. But this is why my answer to that question is it depends. And it depends on the community. And I believe to my core that the more energy we as communities can spend engaging in this sort of work with our community, the better off our students will be and the stronger and healthier our education systems will become. So next slide here. I'm gonna do a quick time check because I'm really bad at not doing this for 3 hours, really bad. 2:36. I think I have some time. I'm going to dive into the next piece, but I want to just kind of go back and review and reflect on what we've talked about so far. So at the beginning, we talked experiential learning, and we really kind of came to terms with the fact that it's happening, but it's not happening enough. And experiential learning is about, it's a series of interacting with curriculum and then reflecting and getting your hands on your learning. And then we talked about, well, if we're going to have experiential learning, what should we experience? What should these experiences be? And that really comes down to the graduate profile work, to where you ask the community, what does it mean to have a diploma in Hobbs, New Mexico? What does it mean in Las Cruces to have a diploma? And I'm super excited. We've finished our survey for our graduate profile in Las Cruces. We're just starting our focus groups, to where we pull people in from the survey, and we're going to do some in-depth focus groups to get a better feel for what the community believes a diploma should mean, from, let's say, Organ Mountain High School or Las Cruces High School here in Las Cruces. So then that leads us to the third kind of defining question in what I've prepared for us today. And that is, so we want to learn by getting our hands on our learning through experience. We want to make sure that those experiences align with our community. And then how do you know that students have learned what is taught? Another fundamental question, and I will open that up to the chat once again and sit here awkwardly for the first 12 to 15 seconds. Daniel coming through with my favorite one, my favorite answer to this question: when they are able to teach someone else what they have learned. Vanessa, let me just expand this again. Vanessa saying when they can explain to you what they have learned, very similar to Daniel's answer there. Cheryl with demonstration in a meaningful way through teaching a project. I see a trend here. Stephanie saying that she's also agrees with Daniel's answer there. Abir, when they start connecting learned concepts with their everyday and compare it to other concepts. Well said. And I'm going to be brave and wait for one more. Brave and vulnerable here, guys. Don't let me down. There it is. Using knowledge in life instead of just repeating. Thank you, Alexis. That landed well. Good answers, excellent answers. I agree across the board. And I just want to kind of dip in for a second. I'm going to go back to standardized testing as a dipstick for the system. I think there's a place for it. I absolutely believe that math and reading, that a student being able to read by the time they get through the our school system, that's a civil right, right? That's a civil rights issue. Students should be able to read. They should be able to do mathematics, but that's not everything, right? When we look at those graduate profiles, those are two very important outcomes, but actually a very small sliver of what is necessary in careers and in communities and to be able to be successful in college. But they are civil rights. So I don't want to minimize math and reading at all, but really, I've always thought of mathematics as just a playground for failure, right? To where you can go in and you can get it wrong and you can try again and you can learn new concepts and you can learn new skills and you can flex those muscles and you can build those muscles when it comes to my core learning philosophy of try, fail, and adjust. Mathematics is a beautiful playground for that, and I've dabbled more than most in that playground. I'm very geeky when it comes to statistics and mathematics, and I see it as a playground. And oftentimes kids see it as a test, right? Rather than a playground. Kids see it as their self-worth, right? They see it as whether they're smart or not. They see it as a barrier to their being able to progress. We know from a lot of the work that we've done in mathematics that kids aren't necessarily behind, they're stuck conceptually. There's a certain concept that they're stuck on in mathematics, and then it's hard to progress from there. So really, assessments, how do you know that students have learned what is taught? Absolutely. Capstone assessments will answer that question for us. And we're going to skip the video. I don't know how to do that. Oh, I did it. We're skipping the video because of time. And what is a capstone? So really, it's a reframing of the assessment narrative. Capstones, when done right, they're of equal merit and value to the SAT. So this is a slide from Future Focused Education. They're real leaders in this work in the state. I won't say that just because I'm on the board, but because it's true. Both can be true, right? Capstones are developed from the bottom up. Heidi McDonald in the waiting room. That's one of my favorite human beings. Can we let her in? All right, Heidi's in. I feel fuzzy. These are developed from the bottom up, not the top down, and really an equity response to Yazi Martinez. And I'll let you kind of read through what Future Focused Education has said about the Graduation Equity Initiative. And I'll just say that capstone courses are I'm going to disagree with the of equal merit and value to the SAT. I'm going to say that they are worlds beyond the SAT, because they're able to measure so much more than just college readiness or mathematics or perseverance. There's I would say 80% of the outcomes that we looked at the graduate profiles before wouldn't necessarily be measured by the SAT. Again, a very valuable tool, the SAT, to be able to check in on some of these things. But in order to really assess some of the things that we talked about in graduate profiles, you're going to need some capstone coursework. And again, I won't read it to you, but you can see there what capstones look like. And I'll kind of finish up this part of the presentation by kind of pulling all of them together. So we talked about experiential learning. We talked about capstones. We talked about something else that is lost in my COVID fog. I got to tell you guys, it's a real thing. And I'm doing my best here, but I do get a little tripped up sometimes. But work-based learning and capstones, it's identified by NRCC as learning technical, academic, and employability skills by working in a real work environment. And there are so many benefits to tying these things together. So in a perfect world, what we would do is we would go to the community, we would ask them what's important, what should our students be learning? Then we would build an educational system that aligns with that work, and then it gives students the opportunity to put their hands on their learning in real work-based environments to be able to apply their academic learning with their hands-on. And then what we would do is we would have capstones that would be able to assess and demonstrate that students have developed these skills and knowledge and abilities. And I will cap this presentation by asking you to imagine. So I don't know how many of you have been in a standardized testing environment. It's very sterile. It's very locked down. There's no creativity, right? It's a very rote. There's monitors, there's keyboards, there's no food or anything fun like that. Just picture that for a while. And again, very important as a dipstick for the system, but not the end goal of education. And then compare that image with this one gets me too. If you could just imagine walking in to the let's say it's at the convention center in Las Cruces, that you walk in and it's alive and vibrant, and you hear children and you hear kids and you hear young adults and you see community members, and you're walking through the convention center and students are demonstrating what they've learned. Students are demonstrating their communication skills. Students are demonstrating that they've worked in teams. Students are showing actual community members and people who will be hiring these students, or people who will be encouraging these students to go across the street to New Mexico State University. And there's a communication there, and there's intimacy, and there is real human beings, and there's colors, and there's life, and there's music. And then down the hall, there's an orchestral performance. Over across in that big ballroom, there's kids with the robots that they've built. And just compare those two visions and decide which reality is important to you. I've made that decision myself, and I believe the pathway to it is through graduate profiles that lead to strong experiential learning that then culminate in a very beautiful capstone experience that is a partnership between schools and the community. And with that, I'm going to hit the stop share button, and I'm going to hope that I'm pretty close on time, which I believe I am, and turn it back over to Lori, and thank everyone for joining today.
Thank you so much, Tim. Yeah, you're pretty good on time, because we also got started a couple minutes after 2 o'clock. So we tried to build in some time now just for, wow, that was a lot of really engaging and thoughtful information that Tim just presented to us. So we wanted to leave some time for, what questions are coming up for you right now? What thoughts do you have? What kind of discussions do you want to have? What's coming up for you right now? This is a good time to share.
So I have a quick question, if that's okay, Lori.
But
Thank you. So Dr. Hand, I love everything that you said, and I really think a great place to start is with the graduate profiles, because that organically moves down the list of everything else that we want to do. My concern is just, so this whole shift with education, do our communities have the capacity to place all the students? So if we're looking at those experiential learning opportunities, do we have the capacity to place all the students that we need to place? I think currently we have a program in Las Cruces Public Schools called ACE, and there are 400 students who are enrolled in there next year. And I know that that becomes problematic. And I didn't mean to put a negative aspect on this, because I love everything that you're saying. But as a community, do you think that we can work through that? And what steps would we need to take to make sure that our community embraces all of these students who are coming out and wanting that experience? Thank you.
Thank you, Pam. And that's certainly something that has kept me up at night as well. And my answer to that is that a student's education through public education, we have siloed that experience, right, to buildings and classrooms and curriculum and standards and tests, right? In order for all of this to work, it requires relationship building between the community and the school and the workforce and the economy. Johns Hopkins does a lot of things well, but one of the things they do very well is they do a pretty broad survey about what skills, abilities, and attributes and dispositions does the economy like expect, right? Once a student gets out, they've done a lot of work on that. And there's this, it's the same type of thing, like when the fourth grade teacher says, well, if they just would have done better in third grade, right? Or if once kids get to high school, well, middle school didn't do great, or once they're in elementary school, well, why didn't you go to pre-K? It's the same thing about when an individual gets to a job interview and the business says, well, I wish they could have learned how to shake my hand or look me in the eye or done this or that. All of those types of things are the responsibility of the community, right? And in order for this to be able to work and to be able to thrive and be able to sustain, it's going to take some real I'd say cage busting conversations between the community, between the workforce, and between schools to really actively knock down the walls of the classroom, right? And so this is not like a cookie cutter approach that we can just come in and say, now we're doing experiential learning. It's going to take a lot of relationship building. It's going to take a lot of vulnerability, both within education. We as educators have to say we can't do it all. And the community has to come together and say, well, we can't expect you to do it all, right? And so I would say that the infrastructure would have to be built. It would have to be funded, right? I think the state has a role in making sure that it's funded. I know I'm working with the PED very closely to try to make sure that part of the $10 million that was appropriated for career and technical education, that we use some of that money for work-based learning. And Heidi, I know you and your team are working hard on that, but it's looking like we'll have money to have these be paid experiences. And that in itself changes the entire game. When the state will pay the kids to go and sit in an architect's building, and actually, I'd like to get some tools in the hands. I don't want them running copies. I don't want them making coffee. I certainly don't want them filing because that's the experience sometimes that happens, but it's going to take a monumental effort in relationship building between the two entities.
Thank you. And the chat is now blowing up. So you've got everybody's attention and everybody thinking. Daniel's question, excuse me, Daniel has a question, and that's what can private businesses do to contribute to experiential learning? And as a follow-up, since it depends on each community, what should businesses in Southern New Mexico do to contribute to this work?
Excellent question, Daniel. And actually it's easy because I just answered it with Pam, right? It's that, and it's something that you and Nucinda are very good at. It's teaching, and Daniel, I know you run into red tape, right? When it comes to on the school side. So I see both sides of it. I see you specifically and Nucinda reaching out often to build those relationships, and I see you running the walls, right? So what you have to do is keep doing what you're doing, but then also teach other partners in the business community how to do it. And then I have to work with you to figure out what barriers and walls that you run into, that we've sat down and had very critical conversations about that. And when it comes to how else you can help, we need to talk about how the community is involved in the graduate profile work as well, because really the graduate profile needs to come from businesses and from New Mexico State and from Doña Ana Community College and from the different stakeholders around the city, so that we can all do it together. And I guess my answer to both of these questions is it sure as heck isn't the way we've been doing things, right? That's not going to work. And it's going to take some really brave conversations to break down those walls. I just said heck. That's the first time I believe I've said heck in my existence.
Sometimes it's just the right word. You never know. All right. Next, Ryan Steinmetz says, this is super helpful information in helping me support the why when our city departments wonder why we should be working with interns. It will help me connect the dots more directly for our city departments, that it's in their best interest to support these kinds of learning experiences. Thank you for this. Yes, it is our community's responsibility to actively take part. Thanks for that, Ryan. Erica says, I wonder if elements of this can be built into the PED and county internship program. Even in the summer, they could get credit for it.
That's the plan. We're planning to assign credit for those internships. And then also, I think as Ryan posted, that it's currently going to be $13 an hour. I'm still, well, so there's some debate about what the kids should be paid. There's some that are saying it should be $15 an hour. And then that's hard when you've got them standing next to another person who's employed there at less than that. The $13 an hour is probably where we're going to land around paying students. There's money for it, guys. I got to tell you, there's money in every couch cushion up there in Santa Fe right now. And there will be, I know directly that there will be money provided to pay students for these internships. And then if we can pay them, get them credit, and here's the big one, and here's the part that's hard. I want to say none of this is easy. Like, you know what's easy is standardized testing. That's easy, right? The easiest, you know what it costs? For the entire state of New Mexico, it's $6.9 million, and we can give a test to every kid, and we can give them interim assessments and check out how they're doing the whole way. That's easy. This is hard, but 92% of American Indian students that aren't being served by the system, I say change the system personally.
Are there any other questions? Cheryl has a comment. We've got some thank yous coming in. Ryan, youth summer interns will be getting $13 an hour this summer. Daniel says, thank you, Dr. Hand. Cheryl, Cheryl is a tremendous advocate for community share at Cruces Creatives. She said we've given out 10,000 in mini grants. This to teachers, right? And connected over 3,000 students to a project with a community partner since September. They are seeking business and nonprofit partners. And Cheryl, I can probably give you like a minute to talk a little bit about community share if you want to.
Awesome, thank you so much. Well, I saw that myself when I had older children of my own and a younger child who really hit that whole testing craze in New Mexico as a 10th grader. You know, her education got very much test focused. And so when my principal started project-based learning and I saw the incredible difference it made to lift that back off of teachers and students, I was definitely sold. So we're doing that work. We have had amazing collaborations. I don't know if you've seen the recent, but an AES gifted facilitator worked with the robotics team and therapists and an engineer to make a student a wheelchair. And because the student was small of stature, that was their project. And we're connecting many classes with nonprofits for community service projects. We had a young Latino engineer go visit a preschool class. And I really believe firmly that if we're addressing career in college with high schoolers, it's way too late. Because I don't know about y'all, but I played with my schoolhouse and had school for all my stuffed animals as a kid. And I think we make a lot of our decisions about our career path much younger. So Tim, I hope that we can chat about community share and really facilitating, because right now a lot of teachers still feel like there's too much on their plate and that this feels like more. And so my thought is what is the district doing to help teachers reframe and to take some things off their plate so that they feel that the project-based learning and project-based assessment is within their capacity.
And that gives me plenty of fodder for a wrap up, Cheryl. Thank you. That'll give me some good guide marks here to wrap things up. And the first thing that I'll do is I will say that to your point, none of this is easy, none of this is simple, none of this is cheap. And the cheap and easy way of test and repeat and test again, it's done its job. And what the job, and it's very important for it to test the system, and the testing has shown us the system is not working, right? And so what the district can do, what we're starting to do, the first step is we're going to do the days where there's we're adding in a day every month to where we'll work together with schools and principals to get the resources to be able to try this once a month. And then my hope and my goal and my thoughts through all of this being extra is that's the big psychological barrier that we're going to have to overcome, is in that we've always thought of supercomputing challenge as something extra. We've always thought of Key Club as something extra, FFA as extracurricular. This is my opinion, that is school, right? The Enlace trip that they just took the kids to go check out colleges. That's school, right? And it's not extra on top of school. And in order to be able to make this shift, my thought is you have to start by reforming the assessment system. Because if we switch to a capstone assessment matrix for school, you can't help but not do all the rest of this. And if we have a graduate profile that says that collaborating in teams is part of what a diploma means, then we can't just do math and reading, right? And it's going to be that the major psychological barrier that you very directly talked about was, how do we do this on top of everything we're doing? I'm telling you we can't, and I'm telling you we shouldn't, and I'm telling you what we're doing isn't working, and we need to swap this work for the work that traditionally has not served our students well. And I'm 1 minute over, and I thank each of you. I care deeply about this work, and I appreciate you taking some time to listen to me ramble a little bit today.
Well, this was amazing, Dr. Hand. Summer was going to close us out, but she has construction going on at her house and everything's very loud. So I'll close this out instead. Man, Zoom problems, huh? And pandemic problems. But, you know, we could have easily spent 2 or 3 times the amount this time. And so obviously this is just an overview. I think so many of these community learning sessions have really been it's just a drop in the bucket, right? Scratching the surface. But these are things that we want you all to take with you. Because there should be follow-up conversations to this, right? So what does it look like for the community to jump in with experiential learning? When I looked at, Tim, what you held up was the calendar for next year, my first thought was, okay, then how can the Success Partnership, how can the community jump in and help with that? How do your graduate profiles of LCPS, and also wondering about Hatch and Gadsden, you know, how do those inform then? Like, how can the Success Partnership, that's part of the intention behind the work, is that as a community, how can we align our K-12, our post-secondary, and our workforce systems? So there's so much to talk about after this. And I too am trying to be aware of time, so I know we've got to wrap up. I want to thank you all so much for being here today. We want to continue to have conversations. I know Cheryl put in her information, her contact information, if you're interested in community share. Also want to, if you are interested in following up on these conversations and joining us with the K through Career Coalition, I'm putting a link in the chat right now to the K through Career Coalition page. And so you can enter in your information, and then Dr. Hand and I will continue to be in touch, and we'll continue to be talking about how we can work to align things and how the Success Partnership can help support these efforts. We really are in, I think, a turning point, and we have this valuable opportunity right now in this moment to do something different with our schools. So.
Yes, ma'am. And I'm going to go nerdy for just a second and say that I'm going to go to the second law of thermodynamics and talk about entropy, and that it's going to take a lot more energy. Things have fallen apart. The pandemic, things in general have fallen apart, and entropy says things fall apart. And I'm positing that it's going to take a lot less energy. Everybody's rushing to put things back together the way it was, right? It's going to take way less energy to just do it right and do it new than to try to patch everything back together, because things do fall apart, and the time is now to do something new and different. And I'm happy to engage with anyone who'd like to go down that path.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone. Please join me in thanking Dr. Hand for being with us today. We look forward to continued conversation. There you go. Lots of fans.